Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Sarah Judd-Lamb. I'm the Executive Manager, Policy Development and Research at Carers New South Wales, and I'm pleased to be kicking off the first of 3 lunchtime learning sessions being held by Carers New South Wales this week with a policy and research focus. And the session today is focused on the new 2022 National Carer Survey full report. So you'll be hearing a little bit more about that. I first want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we are presenting from today at Carers New South Wales, the Gorogal people of the Eora Nation, and extend my respect to their elders and elders past and present from all the lands that are represented by attendees joining us today, and also to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, especially during a time with challenging discourse, and we welcome everyone joining today. We are celebrating National Carers Week this week. Before I get into that, so Carers New South Wales is a peak non-government organisation for family and friend carers in New South Wales. Hopefully those online are aware of our definition of carers, but just to flag that we're talking about family and friend carers that are supporting someone that lives with a disability, mental illness, a drug and or alcohol dependency, a chronic condition, terminal illness, or who is frail due to age. And before we move on from that slide as well, it's really important that we reflect today on carers. Many of you will be aware it's National Carers Week this week, and there's many events and activities ongoing in New South Wales and Australia today and for the remainder of this week until Saturday, celebrating the important contributions that carers make to our communities and to our society. And so Carers New South Wales is proud to be sharing information, delivering activities for carers and for other stakeholders in recognition of the important contribution of carers. And so I am now pleased to hand over to Carers New South Wales CEO Elena Katrakis to officially launch our survey report today. Thank you, Elena.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And there's certainly a lot happening throughout Carers Week this week, which is fantastic to see. So Carers New South Wales' commitment to research really goes back to our very beginnings and to our founders, Claire Stevenson and Avril Fink, back in 1974, 1975, where they undertook the first carer survey in New South Wales. And today, research really is embedded in our strategic plan, and it's part of everything that we do. Carers New South Wales has been conducting biennial surveys for a number of years now, and since 2020 we've led 2 national surveys with the fantastic support of the state and territory carer organisations. Our 3rd national carer survey is just around the corner, coming up in 2024. Initial results from the 2022 National Carer Survey were released in Carers Week last year, and since then a range of publications have continued to be made available on the Carers New South Wales website. It's informed many presentations and partnerships with a range of researchers. And today gives me great pleasure to say that we're launching the full detailed report on the 2022 data set. In announcing the launch of the full report, I really want to acknowledge New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice, which funds Carers New South Wales to undertake the survey. And again, I especially want to thank the state and territory carer organisations, particularly their CEOs, who have supported the rollout of the survey, extended the reach broadly across the country, but also for the staff in each of the state and territory carer organisations who have worked tirelessly with our team at Carers New South Wales to bring the data and the report together, which has been fantastic. And finally, I want to thank the almost 7,000 carers across the country who have shared their experiences through the survey. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. So we know that, it takes time to do a survey, so their valuable time and their perspectives are really central to building that strong evidence base about carers and to inform carer inclusive policy and programs. So a big thank you to everyone, and a big thank you to the whole of the team at Carers New South Wales, the Policy Research and Development team, led by Sarah and Lucas, who have done a fantastic job. So I'm now going to hand over to our Research and Development Officer, Dr. Lucas Hofstadter, to talk you through some of the key findings presented in the report. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you, Elena. All right. I'm very happy to be here, being able to present the full report. It was a big piece of work to get out in time for Carers Week. Starting off with a little bit of background about the survey. So, like Elena said, we conduct a survey every 2 years, have done so for a number of years, but since 2020, it is a national survey with the support of the other state and territory care organizations. The purpose of the survey is to better understand what carers do want and need. So what do their caring roles look like, beyond just, how many hours do they care, but also who they care for, who do they support, what do they do, and what supports do they need to do their important work in their caring relationships. How supported do carers feel is a central question that has become quite salient recently, and we'll talk later about that in the context of care recognition. And really, one of the central topics that has been central to most carer surveys is what supports actually carers' health and well-being. The survey informs our organization's direction. It informs how we provide support and how we conduct our systemic advocacy for the benefit of all carers in the state of New South Wales. But we also share these results with the other state and territory care organizations and advocate based on our data a lot on federal level as well. Just a little bit for the context of the survey. At the heart, really, is the experience of carers. How do carers fare in their everyday lives? But we look at it from basically 4 different perspectives. Like I mentioned, on the one hand, the survey provides an evidence base for our advocacy in the policy space, for questions, what needs to change in support systems, what needs to change in the policy arena to better support carers. This is strongly connected with the second perspective that we have, is that the survey helps improve the evidence base for supports for carers, informs our practice as an organization supporting carers through a variety of offerings. This is connected with the outcomes for carers. We ask questions about health, well-being, psychological distress, financial stress, and the survey provides an important information around how carers are actually faring. What are the outcomes for carers all across Australia? And that connects with research gaps around carers that we're trying to fill. We were, I think, the first survey dedicated to carers that looked explicitly at financial well-being in 2020, and we continued that work. That was one central aspect, and also to help other stakeholders better navigate the environment in which carers operate, be it the workplace, be it the health system, be it the aged care system. We provide information to other stakeholders that work with carers and that want to better support carers. The survey is an important foundation from which to explain to people who might not know what's going on in the life of carers and what it means to be a carer, how they can better support carers, how they can be more inclusive of carers, and how they can enable an Australia that values and supports all carers, as we say in our tagline. Right in the middle of it. The report, I'm quickly going to walk you through what's in it before I'm going to talk a bit more about some selected results that we found interesting to present to you around what supports carer health and well-being. But the report is quite broadly, so we start off with explaining what I just explained to you. What's the National Carer Survey about? Who are our respondents? What's the profile of carers that participated in the survey? The report, of course, also explains our methodology, including our project oversight, how we gained ethics approval. It explains the survey instrument in detail, our recruitment and data collection process, data cleaning and analysis, and of course the limitations that we have as well. In the second part of the report, we present key findings in an overview manner. We start off with what has changed. I'm going to speak a little bit about this in a few moments. One thing that really was, of course, most salient in the 2 years between the 2020 and the 2022 National Carers Survey was COVID-19. And so we start off with a chapter explaining what we found, how COVID-19 impacted carers. We then move on and show the importance of carer recognition that really comes out beautiful in our data, how recognizing and valuing carers really improves outcomes. We then have a look at care and paid work. How do carers fare when they have to combine work and care? And what can be done for carers to better allow them to do so and to better allow them to be active in paid work while they're still caring for a loved one. We then, and this is a very recent topic as well, look at caring and the cost of living beyond engagement in paid work, and look at some factors influencing outcomes for carers in the financial and housing areas. Then we look at carer health and well-being, what supports carers to sustain their caring role and to have lives that are to have good lives and to stay healthy. And then we look at the diversity of carers who participated in our survey. Of course, we do have participants who come from the First Nations of Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander carers. We look at our roughly 18% carers who identify as culturally and linguistically diverse. We look at our respondents that were young carers, that is under the age of 25. We also specifically look at older carers. Male carers are a cohort that are often overlooked as well, because caring very often still is associated with sort of as women's work, which it clearly is more than that. Everybody can become a carer, and it's important to highlight that too. And not just male carers, but also beyond the gender dichotomy, LGBTQI plus carers, also an important cohort that we cover in our survey. We also look at former carers. So once a caring role ends, the effects of that caring role may linger, and we'll ask carers to respond to the survey even after their caring role might have ended. And we look at sort of regional and remote areas and how their experience differs from carers who live in the major cities of Australia. And we look a little bit at the variation across states and territories as a national report, and how results slightly differ depending on the jurisdiction that you live in. And in part 3, we present results in detail. That is literally every question of the survey broken down in tables and graphs. We start off with our section around the caring relationship. Who do carers care for? What do they do? We then move on to a section around services and support. On the one hand, for the person the respondents care for, be it aged care services, be it disability services, be it mental health services or health services, and how supportive they are of carers, how their support impacts the caring role. And then we look at support services for carers, the service uptake, the impact support services can have, and sort of in how far carers use other services, other mainstream services, and how that plays into their experience. We continue with looking at the experiences with paid work and health, well-being, and recognition. The questions we asked is, on the one hand, the self-assessed health status. We ask questions about the subjective well-being, about their experiences of psychological stress, how socially connected they are, and how recognized and valued they feel in their caring role. And the survey ends with a section on finances, financial well-being, and housing, where we look at respondents' income, experiences of financial stress, and whether housing is adequate, both for them and for the needs of their caring role. So we received 6,825 valid responses. That is after data cleaning. 23% of these responses we received by hard copy, which is something that sets our survey apart from many others, is that it is not a pure online survey. We do mail out paper copies to our members, and anyone who prefers to fill out a paper copy can just contact us and we will send that out. And this continues to be a big aspect of our surveys, that we're trying to be a bit more inclusive than just having an online survey. But the majority of carers participated online, and the majority of carers were currently in a caring role. Roughly 6.6%, so 450 carers participated in our survey after their caring role had actually ended. And so the typical respondent to our survey was a woman in her late 50s. She was typically caring for a child, but that includes an adult child who typically was living with a disability. She lives in a metropolitan area and provides care for an average of 104 hours per week, so more than twice a full-time job. So this is the sample breakdown in detail. And it shows, so this table is directly from our report, and it shows on the right side the comparison of our sample to the Australian Bureau of Statistics Survey of Disability, Aging and Carers, which is sort of the most official data source around carers. And this comparison is important for us to really estimate how well we capture how well our sample represents Australian carers overall. Because we do not recruit into the survey as a random sample, our sample is slightly biased towards older carers. It is more female than the Australian carer population. It is on average a bit higher educated, and is biased towards more high-intensity caring roles. Carers who provide care for quite a large amount of the time that they have available. It is nevertheless very diverse. So one thing that I would like to point out, like I said, it is overwhelmingly female, with 82% of respondents being women. But we also have a small but significant contribution from carers who identify as non-binary or other. And I think we're the only data source in Australia that is sort of a mainstream data source that captures non-binary carers or carers who do not identify as either male or female to that extent. The average age, like I said, is 59.8 years, so definitely slightly older than the Australian population average of 51 years. But we have a wide range of age groups. The majority is of working age, so between 25 and 64 years old. It is a bit top-heavy with older carers, where about 40% of our respondents are aged 65 years or older, compared to roughly a third of the overall population. We do have a third of our sample in employment. That is a significant group, and it allows us to conduct very in-detail analysis of that group. It's a bit lower than compared to the Australian general population, but like I said, that has to do with the bias towards more high-intensity caring roles in our sample. 47% of our sample have a disability or long-term health condition themselves, which speaks to the high impact that high-intensity caring roles have on carers' health and well-being, which is slightly higher than the 32% in the general population, of carers in Australia. yeah, it just shows that it aligns in our sample with the high intensity of caring roles and the advanced stage, on average, a little bit more advanced stage of our sample. Our sample, like I said, is nevertheless quite diverse. We've got around 2.7% of our respondents identify as Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander. We've got around 18% carers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And we've got around 4.7% who identify as LGBTQ+. So taking together their sexual orientation and their gender identity, we arrive at around 4.7%. In terms of geographical area, the majority are, like the Australian population generally, living in major cities. However, we do have a large contingent of regional and outer regional respondents, which allows us to, again, look at their situation in quite some detail. In terms of the people that they care for, the majority care for someone male, and it is mostly their child, including other children, or their partner. The average age is of the person cared for is slightly younger. Nevertheless, half of our care recipients are aged 65 years or older. Around a quarter are caring for a parent or a parent-in-law. 37% are caring for a partner, but the majority, 45%, are caring for a child. And our survey captures multiple caring roles, which is why these percentages don't add up to 100%. So because many carers care for more than one person, the number of care recipients is actually higher than the number of parents. So in terms of our results, what has changed from 2020 to 2022 was one of the main questions that we tried to answer with our report. And a lot has happened in these 2 years. As everybody's aware, carers were affected by COVID-19. We had a range of natural disasters, especially along the eastern coast, but also in Western Australia. And especially towards the end of that time, the costs of living started to rise. And we found evidence of that too in our survey. What is interesting for the fact that it was such a tumultuous period overall is that the well-being scores and that the distress and the social connectedness among the carers that we surveyed actually changed very little. You can see in the table below the values for all three dimensions are almost the same. So we still have, and they're still on very concerning levels. So the average score for well-being is 57%, which is significantly lower than the average Australian population overall. But it is roughly stable over the waves of the survey. What has significantly increased, however, is experiences of financial stress. That rose from 50% in 2020 to 57.4% in the 2022 survey. And this is a concerning tendency that carers are more affected by financial risks and by the costs of living. Yeah, this is a very concerning development for us. So if you look specifically at the effects of COVID-19, we can say that the impact, how much people were impacted by COVID-19 varied across the sample and varied across states and jurisdictions, and whether you're from metro or from regional areas. Impacts were, however, felt wildly, either through separation, through lost work, and most commonly through service interruptions. And these indirect consequences were, on average, every case is individual, but on average, these indirect consequences of COVID-19 were more severe than from the illness themselves. You can see the real difference on the right, a lot more carers were separated from family than who had actually contracted COVID-19. And most carers, more than half, were impacted through service interruptions or the complete cessation of services. And that had a significant impact, raising the average distress by 12%, reducing the average social connectedness by 14%, and reducing the average well-being by 13% from already low levels. However, what we see if we look at distress levels in detail is that it increased some aspects of it, but not all the way across the board. And if we look at sort of data points over a longer time horizon and compare them with data that we have available from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, again, various sources, they did their own survey monitoring the well-being of Australians throughout the pandemic. We can see that even in 2018, granted the data comparison here is for New South Wales only, but 2018, 2020, and 2022, for many indicators, are almost stable. Feeling that everything was an effort seems to be more prevalent in 2022 than it was in 2020. But the important insight of this graph is the distress values of carers are significantly higher and have been significantly higher even before the pandemic started. So that on many aspects where we see a spike in the general population, carers had already absorbed that. And this is a quite sort of, in a way, a quite worrying indication that the stress levels that Australians felt throughout COVID have been felt by carers long before that. However, I don't want to dwell on that too much. I do want to try to shift the perspective a little bit, and we've got a chapter in the report that tries exactly that, and not just look at the lower average, but rather look at, okay, what can be done to support carer health and well-being. And one interesting insight is very often when we talk about well-being, when we talk about survey results, we reduce the entire distribution. We reduce the plethora of experiences in the survey to one number, and that's the average. And we wanted to move a little bit beyond that because the average score is never the full story. So we wanted to see it, okay, some carers, however, are doing well. What is different for them and what can we learn from their experience to improve the lives for all carers? So we did some fancy statistical work. That is the background for what I'm going to present now. But as you can see, 25% of our sample have an average well-being score of 75% or more, which is even higher than the average score for the Australian population in general. And we were looking at, okay, what is different for them? The first thing that we found is that their caring loads are much more manageable. Carers with lower well-being have provide on average 107 hours of care per week, which is close to the overall survey average, whereas carers that are in the group with higher well-being provide 70 hours. It is still almost 2 full-time jobs. And I think that speaks to what manageable means. Manageable is still a lot, but it is not overstretching the physical limits that many carers face. So an average caring load of 70 hours per week was associated with having a higher likelihood of being in that group of the top 25%, as opposed to the 107 hours that the majority of the sample provide their care. So the 107 hours are calculated based on the fact that a lot of carers provide 24/7 care. So in calculating these averages, we imputed them as a full 168 hours of care per week. What is closely related to a manageable caring load is whether formal services, so the aged care services, the disability services, the mental health services, and the health services for the person they care for, whether they work for the carer as well. And here we find a clear inversion of how carers judge the services, how they work for them. We see that carers with higher well-being, more than 40% say agree with the statement that the services for the person they care for also meet their needs as a carer, which means they're available when the carer isn't available. They help the carer providing better care. Whereas in the group with lower well-being, we see that 2/3 disagree with that notion, and 2/3 say the formal services do not meet their needs as a carer, which gives an indication what could be improved and what could make caring loads more manageable. With that, highly connected is whether carers feel recognized and valued by services, by the government, but also by their families, friends, and their communities. And what we found when we looked at recognition, so we ask a question, how recognized and valued do you feel or how much do you agree with the statement that service providers, family, friends, government recognize and value your caring role? And we added them up and built an index. And we saw a clear relationship that the more recognized carers felt, the higher their well-being, the lower their distress, and the higher their social connectedness. And this is something that services can do, but also the community more general and the government, showing the appreciation, showing that caring roles are recognized and valued, helps carer achieve a better well-being and a more sustainable caring role. Another aspect that we found is that having access to carer support services to the extent that they are needed significantly improves carer well-being. We looked at this again in the report in detail in more dimensions, but we can see on the one hand, there's a group all the way to the left with the highest average well-being score. This is a group of carers who do not need support, and they have caring roles that they can sustain by themselves. The second group is a group that has a need for support and has their support needs met. And their overall well-being is significantly higher than any of the groups, whether they use carer services or not, that have an unmet need for carer support services. So it is really important that services such as respite are available to the extent that carers need them in order to support their health and well-being. One very important aspect is social connectedness. We found that in the entire sample, 40% in the entire survey, almost 50% are socially isolated or highly socially isolated. And we find a huge disparity between those who feel well, who have a high score of well-being, and those who have lower well-being outcomes. So connecting with friends, socially connecting with friends and community is one of the most important steps that can be taken for better well-being, and carer services need to support carers in achieving this better rate of social connection. And finally, financial security. Financial security and how many experiences of financial stress there are in one's life has a very big impact on psychological distress and well-being. And this graph shows sort of how many, we ask a question, how many experiences of financial stress do you have? And we give examples like, could you afford a sudden expense of $2,000 within a week? Could you, did you have to, were you ever late in the last 12 months on paying rent or on paying your mortgage or on paying your bills? And we asked about 12 of these instances, and we see the more financially stressed carers are, the more psychological stress and the lower well-being they experience. And so we see that finances and sort of financial support for carers has a big role to play in increasing carers' well-being. I hope these snapshots were interesting for you. If you want to know more, you can download the full report now from our webpage, carersnsw.org.au/research/survey. You can also download fact sheets to specific cohorts, but they're also included in the report. And yeah, have a look at all the results in detail. And I'll stop here for the moment and see whether we have some questions before we continue with other aspects of the report.
Great, thanks so much, Lucas. And as I'm sure everyone can see, Lucas is just really across the data and has found some really interesting patterns and some really important findings and insights to inform how care organisations deliver services, how carers perceive their role, how community can be more inclusive of carers. So I hope you've learned something new and maybe resonate with some of the findings that are shared. In many ways, it's probably nothing new to a lot of carers in particular, and it shouldn't be, in that these are carers' voices that have come through the survey. And so hopefully some of you that are here today might have participated or supported the survey. It's just such an important tool to really get an up-to-date understanding of where carers are at. And as you can see, to help us try to understand and then communicate messages about how services can improve and what works to support carers' wellbeing. So thanks very much, Lucas, for sharing your expertise there. We will have some audience questions now, and it's great to see that we've had some things come through. So I might address the easiest one first, in that we had a question from Linda: will this webinar be uploaded online? Yes, so all of the lunchtime learning webinars this week, Linda, are being recorded, will be edited down, and will go on a channel on the Carers New South Wales YouTube account, where you can access them later. And we will send that link around as well to registered attendees once that is available. So people are welcome to rewatch that. And we can share it as well for background for those that would like to know a little bit more about the report, but who weren't able to join today. So thank you for that question. We've had a few others come through as well, and I think I might try and address them in chronological order, just for fairness, because I know some came through a bit earlier. We had another question from Linda initially around the use of the data, and we will touch on this in a little bit more detail, Linda, but Linda's question was, will there be any representation to the federal government about the support needs of carers as a result of this survey? And so briefly, I can address that initially, Linda. We, as Carers New South Wales, and also the state and territory carer organisations across Australia that support the delivery of this survey, we take this data very seriously, and we use it extensively in our collective systemic advocacy. And so many submissions that have gone in since the data became available this time last year have referred to findings from the survey. And so I think Lucas has a little bit more detail on that, but very much this is a survey that aims to really help support systemic advocacy and to inform what governments are doing for carers, what carer organisations are doing. So yes, in many different formats. And what we tend to do is address topical focus in different policy submissions as the opportunities arise, but it also allows Carers New South Wales and the other state and territory carer organisations to address specific issues that come up and do that proactively. So there's definitely a lot of impact. Was there anything you wanted to add on that, Lucas, at this point?
No, I could go forward to the slide and show where we presented this. So we provided some. So in terms of data access and impact, we have analysis partnerships with academic researchers. Like I said, there's an academic interest in that survey as well. It's not just for advocacy. But many of our university partners also are active in systemic advocacy in some point, in that they write engaging pieces that hopefully trickle down as sort of academic knowledge to policy and practice. But we also speak directly to to local health districts, to other peak bodies like Dementia Australia, with the Australian Institute for Health and Welfare, and other state and territory care organizations, to provide them with the data to use that in their advocacy. And specifically to the federal government, there is currently a inquiry ongoing in the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Social Policy and Legal Affairs around the recognition of unpaid carers in the Care Recognition Act. And we provided a lot of detailed analysis in our submission and in the submission of the other state and territory care organizations, using our data to really show how recognition of carers is important, because it helps improve health and well-being for carers and helps them to be able to continue with their caring roles. But we also provided to the federal government indirectly through the Senate Select Committee on Work and Care. We were cited in their hearings and report. The Productivity Commission cited our submission in their position paper on carer leave. And the Senate Community Affairs Reference Committee, in their report on the purpose, intent, and adequacy of the disability support pension, also cited our data. So the federal government is aware, to an extent, that this data source exists, and whether it actually has an impact, whether it actually will change anything, we don't know yet. The gears are grinding, but yes. So we have presented that, not as a whole, but on many different occasions to governments, plural, in Australia.
Thanks for that, Lucas. And one other thing that I might add as well is I think a real benefit of the breadth of our survey is that we can drill down into different groups, cohorts, topics as opportunities arise. So a key example of that was we did some really in-depth analysis on disability support pension and the impacts on carers a while back. So there's lots of opportunities to drill down, and we'll renew the call at the end, but we particularly welcome requests for data and partnership around analysis, just to really make sure that the data can get out there and have impact as well. So that's great. Thank you for a very thorough answer to that, Lucas. We're getting some other great questions through. The first I'll touch on is just, we had a comment earlier on from Marie, just around the caring experience, and particularly noting feeling very dishonoured, judged, and not emotionally supported. And so that's definitely resonates with, I guess, the picture that we often get from these surveys. And we also had a comment from Michelle saying that the wellbeing factors are so important. And as Lucas said, it was really important to us that we try and reframe some of this information to be constructive, because some of the findings can be pretty dire around how carers are doing. And we want to highlight that actually, there are carers that are doing better, and we want to understand what actually can help us achieve that, so we can really lift wellbeing and improve services. So it's great to have some carers today sharing their experiences and insights as well. And I think we had a follow-up question there as well in the chat around just the difficulties that carers have with social connection. And the question, I think, Marie, is probably not one that we can necessarily definitively answer today, but is how can carers essentially have more social connection? How can we overcome this issue where carers can find it hard to develop genuine friendships and balance that with a heavy caring load? And look, I think it's a really, really valid question. And some of the insights that Lucas presented around just the connection of social connectedness to other factors is really important. I don't know, Lucas, whether you wanted to comment specifically on that question, or whether we can kind of leave it as a bit of a challenge, I guess, to those that are working in this area and listening today.
Maybe just quickly, because Alex asked a similar question around social connectedness and well-being, whether sort of the causality, whether there's a causality there. Of course, there's a correlation, because when you're not feeling well, you're not as motivated to go out. You might, not want to connect because the battery is just empty. We are aware that sort of it's not a simple one-way street, but we do know from the literature that social connectedness is a precursor to well-being very often. It goes hand in hand. There's sort of a positive feedback loop. If you feel better, you're more likely to connect socially, which makes you feel better, etc. And the challenge is to get that positive feedback loop going. And again, there are I think formal services, and that gets a bit in, I think Melissa asked this question, goes a bit into the role of formal service providers, that I think it is important to articulate that they are providing a service to the person that a carer may care for, but they have a significant impact on the carer's life. And again, if they work, we don't have data too granularly on who the exact service provider is, but we can say that if the service provider is more inclusive of the carer, if the carer is well informed, if, and this is important, if the services for the person they care for are available when the carer isn't, allow the carer to take a break, help the carer to stay in paid work. All these aspects are, formal services can help with that. You know, don't always have every appointment during work hours. Talk with the carer as well. Treat the carer as a partner in care. Recognize the carer. When services work within these frameworks, the carer has better outcomes. So it's not so much which type of service the carer or the person being cared for uses, it's the individual service. How inclusive are they of carers? So Melissa, we don't have that detail about platform providers or other providers, but we can say that you know, if the carer feels more included and if the carer is involved in the provision of formal services, they have better outcomes.
Definitely. And yeah, all those questions are really interconnected. And I'd also suggest for Melissa, especially, but the others as well, part 3 of the survey report really goes more into each section of the survey and the more detailed results, whereas the earlier part of the report is more broader kind of analytical themes. If you kind of dig in a little deeper in part 3, but also if you have a look at the questionnaire, you'll see the kinds of things that we collect around what is a supportive service for carers. So we have a scale on inclusion and involvement and provision of information, which Lucas was referring to. We also look at carer recognition broadly from services. We also look at sort of issues encountered with a range of services, which include carer support services, but also the major service systems that the people they're caring for access. So we look at quite a lot of different domains. And again, if you want to dig in deeper, you're very welcome to, I know the contact has been put in the chat, to contact us, and we're happy to share more detail. We can't put everything in the report. It's endless possibilities. So, but thank you for those great questions. We did also get, let's go to the other Q&A one. So in terms of process for a moment, we had someone ask about opportunities to contribute to the development of the questions. Did you want to speak to that, Lucas?
Yes. So the survey is governed by 2 committees. On the one hand, the academic working group, but also a state and territory working group. But, and that's important, in the academic working group, we work with care representatives. We have sort of lived experience of carers there. But we're always happy to receive, if you have any suggestions, research at Carers NSW.org.au. Feel free. We're always happy to. We're always happy when we know that this resonates with you and that you want to contribute. So we make an effort of really trying to adapt the survey to the needs of carers. Another source for that is the carer survey has many open questions, and we draw a lot of our sort of questions in it about new issues from issues that we look at these open questions and see, is there any aspect that we're not talking about yet in the survey, and we try to incorporate that in the following years. So yes, if you have very specific suggestions, or if you would like very specific data and would like to know what's happening in a very specific area, please feel free to contact us at research@carersnsw.org.au, and we are happy to help out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucas. And we've had another couple of comments there in the chat just around people, carers, I think, sharing their own experiences and I guess resonating with some of the messages that we've heard today. Are there any other sort of specific questions that people wanted to ask or that I haven't adequately addressed in our conversation? We've had one come in here as well. What strategies do you use for reaching diverse carers, and how can we support you to reach more carers? That's a great question, and does actually is a good segue to how I was going to wrap up. So I might actually speak to that with Lucas as we finish up the webinar. So this is something that's really important. So we're very happy to share our data and to work with others to get these messages out, but we also need participation broadly and support to get the survey out to carers so that we have a good sample size and that we can get reliable, useful results across the country. And you know, if you're an organisation that's working with condition-specific cohort or a particular demographic cohort, and you would like stronger data, a really easy way to do that is to work with us to distribute the survey so that there's a big enough response rate in that subgroup that we can do some really good analysis. So one kind of call to action, I guess, that we wanted to bring to your attention, which does sort of address this to some extent, is we've got an expression of interest form that we have set up, which is specifically around involvement in the 2024 survey coming up. So in terms of, I guess, we're open to anyone supporting the promotion of the survey and anyone individually that's a carer that's listening today participating in it as a carer when that comes around. We are always looking for more carers that are balancing paid work with care to participate, because we have a lot of interest in that data. Lucas, are there other cohorts you would want to call out there in terms of diverse carers?
Well, we do try to work with other peak bodies and organizations in the culturally and linguistically diverse space, in the LGBTQI space. We are always looking for new partners to with interest to promote the survey. Specifically, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander carers. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible for them. It is really we design the survey with them in mind as well. So we're always looking for partners in each of these spaces, and we're trying to be reciprocal with the information and access to the actual data that might be of interest to anyone who's involved, to anyone who is a stakeholder. And you define what is a stakeholder in carers.
And I think Elena wanted to add a comment there as well.
Yeah, look, I think Lucas has covered it, but the state and territory CEOs wanted to have a sort of more detailed focus on First Nations carers, and for all of us at the sort of state and territory level to look at different ways that we can engage First Nations carers in an appropriate way to be able to respond to the survey. And that might be by going around to different groups and, you know, doing some sort of tailored engagement in that way as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Elena. And so in terms of actioning, whether you might be interested in completing the survey, sharing the survey with your own networks, particularly in some of these diverse cohorts, if you're an organisation that connects with carers and would be happy to promote the survey, we've got this form where you can basically tell us now and give us your contact details, your email address, to receive updates as we progress the 2024 survey. And so we'll then let you know if that's what you opt in for, when the survey is ready to complete, or when it's ready to order in hard copy, whether there's promotional material that's ready. So you're welcome to contact or to let us know via that form if you want to be kept updated ahead of the survey, which won't actually go out in the field until actually sort of June, July next year, but there'll be lots of steps along the way where we can get you involved. So please do use that link. We've had another couple of questions come through that relate to that last one around cohorts and languages. So very briefly, because I don't want to finish late today for everybody, but there was a question about specific information on carers of people living with dementia. So yes, and if you have a look at the report and download via the link that was shared earlier, you can see the full questionnaire, and really anything we collect information on we can report on. including cohort groups and including dementia, which we have done some analysis on already for some organisations that have requested it. And in terms of different languages, this is quite a long and complex survey, and we understand that that can impact participation of CALD groups. Similarly to with the First Nations approach that Elena mentioned and Lucas mentioned, we do try to ensure that there's a good level of participation in the survey from CALD groups. We also have done some complementary data collection with focus groups and some other methods to try and reduce barriers to that. So while the full survey is not available in translation, we are each time looking at options for how we can make that more accessible. And if you'd like to speak to us about that further and hear a bit more about what we're planning to do in 2024, you're very welcome to contact us as well. So I think that's captured most of the questions, and we are coming to the end, I think, of our presentation today. Was that our last slide, Lucas? Would you mind just flicking to the next one? That is the end slide. So what I wanted to end with was just particularly saying that as National Carers Week this week, and this being our first sort of online event statewide for National Carers Week, we'd really encourage you to think about attending some other events that we have happening. And so I'm just posting in the chat now where you can find more out about those events. So on the Carers New South Wales website, through our coming events area, you can find all the different detailed events that are being held in person, online, in all parts of New South Wales. But the link that I've included in the chat there is where you can download the events calendar for our statewide events, which particularly are including these policy and research focused lunchtime learning events, and also a range of health and wellbeing events focused on carers. Our next lunchtime learning presentation that is focused on policy and research will happen on Thursday, and that is focused on helping carers to understand how and why they can participate in research. And so we will send around some information about those other sessions happening this week if you haven't seen those already. We also have a panel session happening on Friday about the carer recognition inquiry, which Lucas mentioned in his earlier slide as well. So there's lots coming up. Please do check it out and join in this National Carers Week. And we really hope to have you as part of the ongoing discussion and dissemination of this data, and also as part of the next 2024 National Carer Survey. So that's everything for today. We will share the recording when it's ready, and thank you very much for your interest. Please download the report, let us know your thoughts, get in touch with any questions, and have a great rest of National Carers Week.
Great, thanks everybody.
Thank you.